Tricia, welcome to Full Cup Life. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Tom. Great to be here.
Yeah, so, one of the things that we do on the podcast here is really I'd like to bring people in who have an expertise in an area that our listeners are really interested in, but not only just focusing on the physical aspects of things, but on the mental side of things. And I think that that's kind of like right up your alley, and it's just everything you talk about is just, so uplifting. So I just wanted to have you maybe introduce yourself, let us know what you do and how you got to this point.
Perfect. So I have a company called Heal Your Hunger, and I help people overcome emotional eating so they can feel great without crazy diets or impossible exercise programs. So feel great and look great. And, I was 50 pounds overweight, and that is really, I'd say, the source of all that I do is the memory of having been completely out of control with food. And from the get-go, I grew up in the Northeast, and I was a little butterball, as my friend's mother called me. Of course, I loved that. Roly-poly, all these wonderful, very affectionate words that make you just want to crawl into a rock. So anyway, I was overweight growing up, and it was really something that plagued me. And I didn't know what to do about it except the things that you know to do, which is go on a diet, join a gym, look into some pills and potions and lotions when you get a little bit more desperate, So these are the things I was doing and trying, and nothing I tried worked. I mean, I could lose weight for a time, but I was a yo-yoer, so I had like 5 different size pants in my closet because I never knew where I was going to be. And of course, you don't want to throw out your skinny pants because you really want to fit into those, and you did fit into them for like 5 seconds. It's like, I want to get back there. So you hold on to those for years, and and I was really all over the map, and definitely a binge eater. So I would I'd get I wouldn't intend to binge. I would get, ice cream and brownies and, sit in front of the TV. But then I with your sweet, you got to have salty. So I'd get some salty and, some chips. And it just kind of devolved into this long, 3-hour veg out in front of the TV and ongoing eating until I just felt completely stuffed and gross and mad at myself. Like, why did I do that? I can't believe I just ate all that. And, and many people do this, but for me, it was very common, and I didn't have any control. So when I was around other people, of course, I behaved myself, but I was always obsessed. So I had the thoughts of like, oh, I want to have another piece of that cake. And, I'm going to grab some more Hershey's Kisses, but I don't want to look like a pig, so just, it was a constant obsession for me. And I, because I tried so many different things, I got to a point, Tom, where I just felt hopeless. And I felt like, diets aren't going to work for me because I always blow it. I always put the weight back on, and I had already done like some more deeper things. Like I'd gone to an eating disorders therapist, I'd gone to a 12-step program, but still I pretty much had the same pattern. And so I got to this place where I thought nobody could help me. And what happened was I found somebody who helped me on a different basis. And this person showed me how to really dig underneath that compulsion to eat, and showed me how to deal with my emotions and have healthier tools, like self-care tools, to really use to address my emotions, so my emotions didn't drive me to the kitchen time and time again. Like it,
right. Tricia,
that's right.
Yeah, it's just, the story to me is so. I mean, I really want to dive into like what you learned, obviously, because it's like, what's that key? But to me, I mean, what I hear you saying is applicable across the board. It's not just about eating. There's so many people who they've gone to all the clinic, they've gone to these different places, they followed this protocol and that protocol. It's kind of the conventional thinking, and we just run ourselves through this. But then we feel, I heard you saying like you felt bad that you had essentially like tried and failed because we hadn't gotten to that underlying part. But what's it really, I mean, what's it really feel like? Because like when I hear you talking, it sounds to me like a lot of the people I see with chronic illnesses, or just living life. And it's just that you sort of found food as your outlet. Like, let's dive a little, tell me more about that emotional feeling and what drove you to sort of binge like that, and what the sort of what it felt like on the other end.
Well, the feeling of trying things and having them not work, first of all, is terrible because you always blame yourself. You think, what's wrong with me? There's something wrong with me, that I can't do it. I can't get the diet, you know. And I tell people I talk to who have tried all these different things, they weren't designed to work. Like, a diet fixes like just the symptom. And it's, you know, the weight, you know, overweight is a symptom of overeating. Overeating is a symptom of what's eating me. So I had to go deeper. And if I'm just doing a weight loss program, you know, I'm treating the symptom, not the real problem, which is typical, you know, for people probably who come to see you as well. Mm-hmm. So, so that's a frustrating feeling. And, you know, I describe it as kind of a hole in my soul. You know, I had an emptiness and a kind of just a hole. Like, I just, you know, I was a social person. I was outgoing. I got a lot of things done, very accomplished. And yet I, you know, at night was doing, you know, this binge eating, and had this constant obsession with food that I couldn't really describe to anyone, because, you know, people would make these very astute comments like, just eat more and exercise less. Like, I hadn't thought of that, you know, or no, I'm sorry, eat less, exercise more. Sorry. More. No, eat less, exercise more. But you know, thinking they were helping me, and I'd be like, yeah, like, no kidding. Yeah, that's not going to fix it for me. So, but I will say it's a lonely walk when you are struggling with something and people make suggestions that don't help, you know, or they keep trying to help you treat the symptom and not the source. It's lonely, and you feel alone, you feel despairing, you know, and like, hopeless. I mean, hopelessness is basically where you end up when you've tried so many things.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting too, because I hear so much of that. And it is, I feel like, even like sometimes people will come into my clinic and I feel like, you know, they're like, oh my God, finally somebody's listening to me for the first time. Yet at the same time, they go do it, like they go act as if I'm not listening and I don't really understand what's going on. And it's interesting when I hear you say that, I'm always reflecting like, okay, well, how can I do my work better to serve better? And it's like, it's like, I mean, I feel like even when you see the answer right in front of you, there's this sense of hopelessness and aloneness, because that's the way it's been for the last 3 months or 5 years or 10 years.
No question. And with weight loss, it's decades. I mean, just decades of trying and
since you
failing.
were a kid, right?
Yes. So, I mean, for me, for anybody who struggles with weight, it usually goes on for decades. So, you know, I think it becomes your identity. Like, I'm somebody who will lose weight and get it back again. And you have to change your mindset. Like, you have to change who you believe you are. It's just hard to believe there is a way out when you've tried so many things. So I always tell people you have to take a whole different tack. Like, get out of the diet roller coaster ride, get out of the diet mentality, go deeper, and then you can have a whole new world.
Well, you know, it's interesting, everyone who's listening now, the thing that's really crazy about Tricia is she is full of energy, and she looks like she's been like super thin and fit her entire life. You would never know that this is her story. And the thing that's so impressive to me, Tricia, is that when we hang out, it is like you have seamless energy, but eating this way and exercising this way and just living like this love coming out of you seems effortless. It's not like you're trying, right?
No.
And this is why I really wanted to have this conversation, is because how do you make that mindset shift? Because in my world, this is exactly the conversation. You just change eating and put some other word in there. There's some sort of underlying, I don't like the term, but self-sabotaging, because like you said, you identify with being this particular way. I'm the yo-yo dieter. I'm the person everybody says this. I'm the person with chronic Lyme. I'm the person who my son or my daughter has PANS and PANDAS and they always will flare. Whereas we need to see ourselves as something else. So with food and emotional eating, you know, where do you start? And like, or what did you learn? Because it sounded like somebody really kind of gave you the keys.
I did get so much help. And I will say, in terms of this identification thing, it's especially hard with somebody who struggles with weight, because if you have been overweight and you lose the weight, a lot of that self-sabotage comes exactly from what you're talking about. Is like, it's really hard to look in the mirror and see a thin person when you lose weight. And it took me years to overcome what I call fat head, where you just see a fat person no matter what your weight is, you know, and you look at a picture and you like don't recognize yourself. So it took me years to really outgrow that fat head. And so what happened for me is, you know, when I got off the diet track and I started to really deal with my emotions, and I did have stuff from my past that needed to be dealt with. I mean, we all do. And especially people who struggle with food and weight, there's trauma there almost, you know, almost every time. So not always, but a good part of the time, there's some kind of abuse, which I had sexual abuse as a child. And so, but it's not just that, you know, people always want to go to that one trauma, like root that out and everything will be better. But what happens with trauma, in my experience, is when we have trauma, you know, as kids, you know, alcoholic parent, you know, an infirmed parent or sibling, you know, some kind of abandonment, abuse of some kind. When you have trauma, you have to cope as a kid and you have no idea how to cope. You're not talking, nobody's talking about it. So you're just kind of, you know, groping in the dark, trying to figure it out. And so you develop these other coping skills to get by, and they work, they save your life. So eating is one of them, you know, certainly drinking or smoking pot or anything, you know, escaping in some way to numb our feelings.
Right. And sex, and even exercise. In some people, like a lot of these people were telling you, oh, you know, eat less and exercise more. I'm like, well, maybe food is it for you. Maybe exercise is it for them too.
True.
I mean,
True. Yeah. So masturbation, I mean, it goes on and on. So, you know, what was really important for me is that, I start dealing with those other, I mean, to be honest, other coping tools are just like people pleasing. So if you have an alcoholic parent, you know, and you're a rager in your family, you become a people pleaser. Like you got your antenna up for how to deal with, you know, this, whatever's going on, and how to mitigate, you know, the consequences of a raging parent, alcoholic parent. So you become a people pleaser. Emotional eaters typically become people pleasers, caretakers. You know, we're really good at being chameleons, changing ourselves to meet the situation. And it all stems back from that childhood experiences. So, so my point here is, it's not that one trauma, or just that one trauma, it's sort of the consequential personality traits that we develop to cope with that trauma. And those, they kind of turn into a monster. So emotional eaters are, and people, I think, who don't have a strong sense of self, which I did not, you know, they're always looking for their validation from outside of them. You know, they want other people to be pleased with them. They want accolades. They want credit, you know, because they're feeling empty on the inside and feel like they don't have that validation for themselves. So that turns into a problem in and of itself, that you're sitting there, you know, trying to do all things, you know, be all things to all people. And that creates more stress that we stress eat over. So my point is, it's not just one thing that you have to change. You have to kind of ferret out how am I living? So that's like, what are the ways that I'm living that are creating my stress? And the good thing about that, Tom, is that you don't need 20 years of therapy to go deal with trauma in order to really change things right here and now. If you start dealing, you know, I have something that I teach on called the anatomy of the emotional eater, which is 24 personality traits that make up the emotional eater. And some of these traits I just mentioned, the people pleasing and caretaking and overthinking and overdoing, you know, these are all some of these traits. So if we start kind of looking at the here and now, like what changes can we make here and now? How can we start, you know, like pull back, put some boundaries on our time, stop saying yes to everything, you know, take time aside in the morning for meditation and prayer, you know, things that can help us bring more balance emotionally to our lives. Then we're not driven, like food is not our answer anymore. Food is not how we get fueled throughout the day. Obviously appropriate meals, but not the excess food.
Right. Yeah. You know, it's interesting because it's like, I keep going back to this, but like everything you're saying resonates so much with, I feel like, the human experience of like looking outside of ourselves for validation. Somebody, you know, all the mechanisms you talked about to me were like I think when people start to feel like they let themselves down or there's something wrong with them, these are all mechanisms within you that are trying to protect you from a situation, particularly if you're younger when it happens, where you don't know what to do, but you're trying to protect yourself the best you can. But the thing that protected the 4-year-old or the 8-year-old or the 10 or 15-year-old, when you're 30 and 40, you probably don't need anymore, but they're still there just because that part of you is trying to love and protect you.
Yep, they stick to you, and it's like they're outworn coping tools. You know, they saved our lives at that time that we needed them and picked them up. But as adults, they don't work anymore, and they cause stress, and they cause breakdowns in our bodies. You know, and that's why we have to take a look at how we're living. You know, I often say it's not an eating problem, it's a living problem, but it's true. It's not anything, you know, autoimmune. It's not whatever, you know, name the problem. It's not really that. We have to look at how we're living.
So how do you start to make this change? I mean, if you were to give somebody like maybe, you know, 2 or 3 tips or places to start, things that really kind of unlock this puzzle for you.
I would say number 1 tip is slow down. Mic drop. Right? Like, we're all too busy. I'm still guilty of it. We're too busy. But it's okay to be busy, but what we need is we need some kind of morning routine, a way to get centered, at least start the day with yourself and your divine being, you know, as your divine being, as your divine self, your higher power, whatever you call it. Start the day at least, you know, getting aligned. So I can't recommend enough, and I recommend it to all my clients, you know, and for emotional eating especially, meditation is vital. Like, emotional eating, you can't just take away food, you know. I have this quit sugar challenge coming up, like you mentioned. You can't just take sugar out of your diet. You've been leaning on it for so long, you know, what are you going to replace it with? And so you have to have new tools if you're going to take away the excess food. So meditation, you know, doing spiritual readings in the morning, just having a little ritual, you know, set your alarm for half an hour earlier. You know, you'll be okay. You go to bed earlier, you know, and then just spend 30 minutes in quiet time, you know, some kind of quiet time. Yeah. I mean, we tell our kids to do it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, like, as we grow up, though, a lot of times we kind of don't, it's taking care of ourselves. Like you were mentioning earlier, we train out of people, you know, and really, and it's so many, and parents, I mean, as a parent, I know this, and certainly, you know, is we look at, like, we have to take care of our kids and our spouse and if we own a business or we're a teacher or whatever, we have to take care of everybody else. But you can't take care of other people unless you take care of yourself first.
Absolutely. You know that.
I love what you're saying there.
Yeah.
When you make that change, Tricia, one of the things that I see people run into is people see you, not only do you see yourself as a yo-yo eater or the person with chronic Lyme disease, but so do other people.
Right.
So what is the experience for the emotional eater who makes that shift socially, because now you're going out as a completely different person?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, my clients will tell me all the time, like, you know, my husband eats crap, you know, what am I going to do? And, you know, and my friends, whenever we go out to dinner, you know, the bread is sitting there or whatever. And my experience is if somebody is looking to really change their eating habits, don't try to do it alone. If you're an emotional eater, you do need emotional support. You know, if you don't have the ability to just course correct and lose those 5 pounds and you're on your way, if that's not you, if you have a tendency to chronically struggle with weight, you have to get support and be among a community of other emotional eaters, in my experience, because, you know, being powerless over cookies is kind of a strange condition to have, you know. And when you do it with other
Right.
people, though, it makes it so much easier. So then when you're out to dinner, it's like, oh yeah, my friends on my Zoom calls, you know, they're not eating bread either, you know, so I've got some camaraderie, I've got some support behind me, you know. And so because otherwise your head starts working on, you're like, I'm the only one not eating dessert.
Right.
Like, everybody's eating dessert but me. Poor me, poor me. And your head just works on you, and then you're like, screw it, I'm gonna have dessert like everybody else, and then I'll be a part of. Like, eating dessert really makes you a part of, seriously.
Well, oh, I know. I mean, I even think about it's interesting how I'm trying to come up with a different word, but our society has this thing called social drinking.
Right.
I mean, it's just by definition, it's like we all become alcoholics together.
Right.
So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of an interesting concept because it's almost like it's these coping mechanisms that allow us to fit in. It's like two things that are jumping out at me. One is I fit in with other people,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of our family, we go out like, you know, like Thanksgiving, I'm like, literally the table, like the whole countertop is filled with the food. And then it takes them an hour when we're done to clean that up. And then they just cover it all with dessert.
Yeah.
And they think I'm nuts because I don't eat it. Because I'm like, I mean, I might have like a mini cookie to just, you know, not be a jerk in front of everybody. But it's just like, it's not my gig. But it's that. And then there's that self-soothing. I mean, is it really just, does it go back always to sort of like that trauma piece, or are there other things that people are typically getting stuck on
Yeah.
that really trigger this?
It's, you know, stress, I would say, is the number one cause of stress eating, of course, you know, and comfort eating. And, you know, people might not relate to having trauma or being an emotional eater.
Right.
But I'm going to offer you a little tool for identifying some of the things that might drive the eating, just to kind of raise people's awareness, you know. And because people often say to me, oh, I'm not an emotional eater, you know, and yet they're carrying, you know, 30, 40 extra pounds on them. So probably they are,
Right.
but the food is working. So they don't know what their emotions are. They're not even aware. And the thing is, that's the thing about emotional eating, is it's not necessarily binge eating. I mean, people are like, oh, I don't sit in front of TV and binge. But if your choices are always carby and sugary, you know, choices, that's usually for emotional reasons. Of course, pasta tastes great, you know, but the thing is, if it's always a pasta choice or a potato choice, you know, a heavy carb corn choice, we tend to eat heavier carb rich foods because they deaden our emotions. They put a blanket on our emotions. When we're feeling upset, we don't think of eating a salad, you know, we think
True
of
story,
chips.
right?
And cookies, you know. But the reason is because they quell the emotions. Of course, they give us a serotonin, you know, hit as well. And so those are emotional choices. If you prefer potatoes over broccoli, if you prefer a banana over an apple, you know, we gravitate towards heavier more carby foods because they give us a sense of calm. And so that's an emotional choice, just to kind of help people understand that.
Well, you know, what's interesting is I was just going to say, I love you brought in bananas, because as a lifelong athlete, it was hard to wean off of bananas. And like, I use bananas in a very specific place. And I know we talked the other day about cycling, and that might be one of the times, because I take a big sugar hit, but you don't even get the big spike because you're actually in the middle of using it. But outside of that, I mean, I've basically cut them out of my diet for the last decade, because it's a big sugar hit. And then as soon as I thought the sugar hit, what you remind me of is, now guys, this is going to come out of left field for a lot of people, but bear with me for a second.
I can't wait.
Yeah, this is a good one. So when we have little children, boys, who are going to be circumcised, you can actually take a little gauze, and they dip it in sucrose and put it in their mouth. And that is enough to let you do the whole procedure oftentimes. Now, some people are nice, will use numbing medicine, but it is, as a child, it is like a newborn. This is as effective as a narcotic in numbing pain.
Whoa.
Sucrose.
Wow, that's incredible.
So this sugar hit, it's like, I mean, I've heard that like sugar is 8 times more addictive than cocaine, right? I mean,
Yeah,
we are
it's
getting
crazy.
serotonin hits, we're getting dopamine hits, we're getting, I mean, so it's interesting. And Tricia, maybe what has been your experience? Because I grew up thinking that Coca-Cola was a food group, right? That's just
Right.
what happened when I was young. And as I weaned off of that, it's like, I realized that the less and less sugar I ate, the more I actually enjoyed other foods and I could actually taste things.
Mm.
I mean, does that come up for folks in terms, in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody gets off of sugar, I mean, it totally changes your taste buds. I mean, people who eat sugar, they don't like stevia. Like they're like, that's gross, But if they don't eat sugar, all of a sudden stevia is tasting pretty good. But I always tell people stevia won't be good if you're still eating sugar, like because you prefer sugar, your taste buds will prefer sugar. So, but if somebody's off of sugar, you'll start like your taste buds will wake up and you'll start like you can eat romaine lettuce and taste the sweetness of romaine hearts, or something else that's normally
One of my favorite foods
right.
ever.
So good.
Guilty. I love.
Yeah,
I mean,
juiced
I like
romaine
sugar too, but
hearts. Yeah,
oh, I do.
so,
I love them. It's just
yeah.
like, so and these are a little on the sweeter side, but my daughter will take a thing of pea tendrils, like the little sprouted
Oh
peas, and
yes.
she'll eat a whole container of them
Wow.
in lieu of like a dessert. Because I mean, granted, they're a little on the
Nice.
sweeter side for a veg, but it's just like green and a stalk.
That's
You're like,
amazing.
well, and what's interesting too, Trish, is like I grew up not being introduced. They're like, oh, kids don't like their veggies and stuff and whatever, and then they just like force these gross canned peas that my dog wouldn't even eat down our throat. But with our daughter, it's like we gave her options of things, and she just starts to eat it all, and she loves it. She still loves dessert. I mean, and it's like her, my wife, and my mom call themselves the dessert queens, right? But they just take the it's not like it's I feel like sometimes what people are doing to try to get off of these things is to kind of put a stake in the ground, like no sugar, and like you said, like removing versus adding something. And I think that that's an important piece, and maybe we can dive into it just a little more, like, as a how do we make that step from completely shutting ourselves off from the thing that's been our pacifier essentially for a long time versus making that new leap? Is it really the addition of healthier food choices and the others fall away, or?
Well, I mean, I think again, it's you have to have a system for doing it. In my experience, it depends really on how much of an emotional eater you are, on how easy it's going to be to cut something like sugar out of your diet. And so you're going to need like other tools to support you if you are an emotional eater. But for anybody who's hooked on sugar, which is anybody's hooked on sugar is probably an emotional eater. They're probably hooked not just for physical reasons, but for emotional as well. I find personally that having good swaps is really necessary. So I mentioned stevia, and in my Quit Sugar Challenge, I offer a ton of recipes that are super yummy, but they don't have sugar. And I think that gives people some perspective on, because everybody thinks, oh, if I'm going to give up sugar, my life is going to suck. like it's going to be so boring. I am going to be boring, and there's sort of this idea of those,
Right.
like all of a sudden we go from Technicolor to gray, but it's not true. It's absolutely not true. Like you can have really enjoyable foods with a little bit of sweetness and they're healthier for sure. Sugar does so many terrible things to your body, as you know, and probably people listening know, that it's not worth it. It's not worth, the price you have to pay. So the idea that we have so many amazing alternatives now, ice creams without sugar, chocolate without sugar, and you can make things at home that don't have sugar.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, is when you're saying, like, when I first started eating stevia, even I'd already cut most of the sugar out because I just, I was so ill at the time. My body just rejected all things nasty. It was like, because I started doing yoga, it was just sort of, I started to listen almost by accident, but I didn't like stevia. And over the years, stevia has become more and more sort of like, okay, and it's like, And there's certain chocolates and certain recipes where, I mean, you would never even know there's not sugar in it.
Yep.
But what's really cool is like a lot of people in my work say Lyme disease, oh, if you take sugar, you're feeding the Lyme. I don't think that that's really been proven, but what you're doing is you're suppressing your immune system. And what's really kind of cool about stevia is we're finding that for the last 1,500 or so years, they've used it as an antimicrobial. And more recently, we found that some of the biofilms in our infections agents that are protecting them and keeping them around, stevia breaks through this.
Wow.
So it's really, right?
Yeah, it's incredible.
Nature is amazing when you actually just go to real nature, you know?
Yeah, that is super cool. I got to use that. That's amazing.
Well, I can't believe that, like, when we decided to talk about this, there's so much overlap, both mentally, emotionally, and physically, with what I'm doing with infectious, chronic infections, and what so many other people are doing, because we're just people. Our bodies are trying to thrive, and our current society is kind of set up in a way that it's really not for humans thriving.
No kidding. Absolutely. We have to get more and more conscious and more self-caring, and that's where the emotional stuff comes in is, what changed for me and where I got my energy was digging out the stuff that was blocking me. Because we all kind of, bury emotions. We all, move fast and then things get left behind, but they're not gone. They're just buried. And so, rooting some of that stuff out and adopting a practice of self-care, and different self-care tools really have enabled me to just be happier, and so it's just really, really important that we have the emotional and the spiritual to supplement the ways that food is serving us, foods, unhealthy foods or other addictions. And I just wanted to talk about the PEP test, Tom, because I think this might help people if they're like, what? I don't eat over my emotions.
Right.
We know oftentimes when we do eat sugar, we do eat too much food, we know what it does to us. But I always say it's also doing something for us. So, and this is true of any unhealthy habit, is we have to look at what it's doing for us. So food, for instance, and PEP, I tell people to use the PEP test, and PEP is an acronym, and the first P stands for painkiller. So we use food as a painkiller to kill emotional pain. And that's why we want the carby foods. That's why we want the heavy foods. It's not lettuce and celery we're snacking on. We're snacking on heavier foods. So they do deaden our emotions, pain of, a life circumstances, that's hurting us. Maybe a marriage that's, needs to end, or a job that doesn't fit us, or a parent that's ill, kid that's ill. There's very legitimate ways that we might be in emotional pain. But the tendency is to douse that pain, with some kind of unhealthy habit. So that's the first way that, food, for instance, we use it to serve us. The E in PEP stands for escape. And so we use food as a form of escape. And I think this year of the pandemic has shown us that, because I think people are waking up to the fact that they're comfort eaters more than ever. People would never have called themselves emotional eaters. My friends are calling me up saying, I think I am one, because all of a sudden, like, the news was so bad, like you can walk out your door and die, so people are comforting themselves with food. So fear and worry are big drivers as well. And the last P in PEP stands for punishment. And this is a little deeper. People won't necessarily relate to the idea of guilt, eating over guilt or doing something else. But if somebody gets out of control with that habit and it's hurting them, like my binges, I'd feel disgusting and bad and hate myself. Well, why would I do that to myself? Is that really a treat? Because we think of food as a treat and a reward, but if someone takes it too far frequently, it's actually a form of punishment. And there are, I always say overeaters or overthinkers. So we do tend to think things to death and blame ourselves and feel awful about everything. So guilt can be an underlying kind of unconscious driver as well. So just to bring people's attention, we use food as a painkiller, as a form of escape, and as a form of punishment to treat or douse, pain, fear, and guilt. And so I just put that out there just kind of as a starting place for people to realize that there might be some underlying things that drive our unhealthy habits.
Yeah, Tricia, I think that that's like spectacular because that resonates with food and a lot of our other behaviors, so
Yes.
that is monster valuable information. So I think that, the overlap is so amazing to me. And it's just like, this is a human thing and we all, need food to live, but it's like kind of like you eat to live, not live to eat. But
Right.
I think that the tools that you're sharing with everybody are spectacular. So I want to thank you for being here for the podcast. This is amazing. And so if people want to reach out and, touch base with you, and sort of learn more about how you address emotional eating, if this resonates with them, where's the best place to get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, they can go to my website, which is healyourhunger.com, healyourhunger.com. And I do offer frequently something called the Quit Sugar Challenge. So for $7. So if somebody wants to get off sugar with other people, locking arms together and doing it and making it much easier and actually fun, they can join us for the Quit Sugar Challenge.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it, and all the best. And everyone, hop over to healyourhunger.com, and then certainly the Quit Sugar Challenge sounds absolutely amazing. So I highly recommend you check it on out.
Thanks so much for having me, Tom. It's always great to see you.
Same here.
The Quit Sugar Challenge is a really fun and easy way to get off sugar and start feeling so much better. Physically and emotionally as well. So, sugar does all kinds of really bad things to our bodies, and makes us feel bad and saps our energy and, causes wrinkles and all those things. So, getting off of it is
I'm getting
really
off of it.
plus.
It's going to make me wrinkly.
Trust me, it's a big driver for a lot of people. So for 5 days, I offer a class every single day talking about, the ways that sugar is hiding in the foods that you even think are healthy, the ways that sugar is hurting you that you might not know, and then how to, quit and have delicious alternatives, recipes that are good swaps for typical yummy foods that have sugar in it. And also we'll talk about something I call sweet sabotage, which is how we sabotage, we do something healthy and then we go back to our old ways and why that happens. And so we dig into that and then just support each other in a really amazing, fun, private Facebook group, posting recipes and successes. And it's amazing how in just 5 to 7 days, how you can totally just uplift your life and your health by getting sugar out of your diet. So if you want support in that, because everybody knows they should do it, but they don't. If you want to actually do it, join us for the Quit Sugar Challenge.